A man with years of experience traveling made a total of 7 expeditions between 1906 and 1924. Dubbed one of the world's greatest explorers, his last letter brimmed with confidence. "You need have no fear of failure," he told his wife. Then, just as the lost city seemed within reach, he vanished. Welcome to Without a Trace. I'm your host, Jalen. Every file holds a mystery. Every story deserves to be heard. This is Percy's story. Percy Fawcett was born on August 18, 1867, to Edward and Myra Fawcett in Torquay, Devon. The Fawcetts were a family of old Yorkshire gentry who had been prosperous as shipping magnates in the East Indies during the late 18th and 19th centuries. At the age of 17, Percy was sent to the Royal Military Academy in Woolwich, where he learned to regard the risk of death as the most spicy sauce to life. Upon graduating, he was commissioned as a lieutenant of the Royal Artillery on July 24, 1886. That same year, Percy met his future wife, Nina Patterson. The two married in 1901 and had 2 sons, Jack, born in 1903, and Brian, born in 1906, and 1 daughter, Joan, born in 1910. In 1888, Percy received his first assignment in Ceylon. He later served in Hong Kong, Malta, and Trincomalee. Percy moved up the ranks, first being appointed adjutant of the 1st Cornwall Artillery Volunteers and later being promoted to captain in 1897. Then, one day, the colonial administrator gave him a strange map, one which seemed to show the way to buried treasure. Percy could hardly resist. As soon as he could, he rushed off, but unsurprisingly, all he found were rocks. But Percy was far from being disappointed. In fact, he was exhilarated. This, he realized, was what he wanted to do. Following in his father's footsteps, Percy joined the Royal Geographical Society in 1901 with the aim of studying surveying and map-making, and he was quickly put to the test. In 1902, he was sent to Morocco, officially as a cartographer, but really to spy on the Sultan for the British government. This job went so well that in early 1906, the Royal Geographical Society gave Percy the job of settling a border dispute between Bolivia and Brazil by mapping an uncharted area of the jungle between the two. It was a long, dangerous expedition, featuring giant snakes, flesh-eating piranhas, and murderous slavers. But for Percy, it was a triumph. What the Royal Geographical Society expected to take 2 years, he completed in just a few months. Percy continued his expeditions into the Amazonian jungle to complete mapping projects and chart previously unexplored jungle territories. In 1908, he traced the source of the Rio Verde, and in 1910, he made a journey to Heath River on the border between Bolivia and Peru to find its source. In 1911, Percy once again returned to the Amazon to charter hundreds of miles of unexplored jungle in the region of the Peru-Bolivia border. He was accompanied by his trusted longtime exploring companion Henry Coston and biologist James Murray. James Murray, unused to the rigors of the tropics, fared poorly, becoming severely ill with fever and infected wounds. Eventually, Percy diverted the expedition to get Murray out. Murray left the jungle with a local settler and then briefly dropped out of sight while he recovered in a house in Tambopata. James Murray reached La Paz in 1912, learning that he was thought to have died. Percy's expeditions grabbed headlines around the world and won him a prestigious medal from the Royal Geographical Society, and even inspired Sir Arthur Conan Doyle to write the 1912 novel titled The Lost World. His adventures led him to develop the theory that an advanced and ancient city lay in the Amazon. His run-ins with native indigenous peoples had convinced him that it was possible for larger groups to thrive in the unforgiving environment of the rainforest. Though thinking of El Dorado as romantic nonsense, Percy could not help wondering whether something might be out there. Intrigued, he began interviewing indigenous peoples and sifting through any evidence he could find. He knew that, if the jungle seemed hostile, it was not because there was nothing to eat, but because Europeans had no idea how to live off the land. The Amazonian tribes, by contrast, lived better than most believed. Far from eking out a meager existence, they often set aside great stores of food and had discovered remedies for afflictions many regarded as incurable. He was convinced that the jungle could support complex cultures and that the indigenous peoples were capable of building vast civilizations where no European had yet ventured. By 1914, he was convinced not merely that there was an ancient city out there, but that it was likely to be found somewhere near the Xingu River in the Brazilian Mato Grosso. He theorized that a complex civilization once existed in the region and that isolated ruins might have survived. As the years passed, Percy became increasingly obsessed with seeking out the lost city of Zed. But the start of the First World War forced him to put his quest on hold. Despite being almost 50, he volunteered to serve on the Western Front and fought with characteristic bravery. Percy was promoted from major to lieutenant colonel on March 1, 1918, and was awarded the Distinguished Service Order, a military award of the United Kingdom awarded for operational gallantry for highly successful command and leadership during active operations. But the moment peace was declared, Percy raced back to South America to continue the search. In 1920, he made a solo attempt to search for Zed, but the expedition was a miserable disaster. He was forced to return after suffering from a fever, and he was forced to shoot his horse. Undeterred, he launched a second search for it in the early 1920s, but was driven out of the jungle by poor weather, fever, and exhaustion. Still convinced that Zed, and potentially a lost civilization, existed, Percy tried to raise funds in Britain for his third expedition. He was met with ridicule from archaeologists and experts. They believed the Amazon could not sustain the kind of large-scale population Percy was talking about, dubbing it a counterfeit paradise, and dismissing the stories and legends he had heard from the locals as tall tales designed to impress European outsiders. It took more than 3 years of campaigning before he finally secured funding for a third mission. Despite warnings that he was taking off on a fool's errand, the 57-year-old explorer remained convinced that Zed was lurking somewhere in the unexplored Mato Grosso region of Brazil. Percy had no shortage of volunteers for his final expedition, but he opted to bring his 21-year-old son Jack, who shared his near-religious zeal for the Zed theory, and Jack's longtime friend Raleigh Rimmel. Percy chose only 2 companions in order to travel lighter and with less notice to the indigenous tribes, as some were hostile towards outsiders. His travel companions were both chosen for their health, ability, and loyalty to each other. They traveled light with only the barest essentials, and after loading up on mosquito netting, canned food, machetes, and other provisions, the trio set sail from New Jersey in January 1925. "We shall return, and we shall bring back what we seek," Percy vowed. However, Percy left instructions stating that if the expedition did not return, no rescue expedition should be sent, lest the rescuers suffer his fate. The expedition first sailed for Rio de Janeiro before trekking inland to the remote Amazonian outpost of Quiaba, where they purchased pack animals and hired a pair of native guides. On April 20th, 1925, they ventured into the jungle for the first time. Ahead of them lay a sweltering maze of dense undergrowth, piranha-infested rivers, and unmapped territory populated by hostile native tribes. During the expedition's early weeks, however, it was the insects that proved the most pressing threat. Swarming mosquitoes and blood-sucking gnats made sleep difficult and travel miserable, and Rimmel's foot became severely swollen from tick bites. Undeterred, Percy set a demanding pace of between 10 and 15 miles a day. During one leg, he got so far ahead of his young companions that he was forced to camp alone for the night. On April 20th, 1925, Percy's final expedition departed from Quiaba. In addition to Jack and Rayleigh, he was accompanied by 2 Brazilian laborers, 2 horses, 8 mules, and a pair of dogs. On May 29th, the team reached Dead Horse Camp, the spot where Percy had been forced to shoot his spent horse and call it quits during one of his earlier searches for Zed. There, they unloaded their equipment and sent their guides back to Quiaba. Before the natives left, Percy handed over the last of the expedition's dispatches. Among them was a letter to his wife, Nina, in which he wrote about the hardships he and his companions had faced, his coordinates, his doubts in Rayleigh Rimmel, and his plans for the near future. "Jack is well and fit and getting stronger every day," it read. "You need have no fear of any failure." At that, the trio struck off into the bush alone. Percy had warned that his expedition would go dark once it entered uncharted territory, but by 1927, nearly 2 years had passed with no word from the colonel or his young companions. Newspapers that had previously hailed Percy as being impervious to the perils of the jungle began speculating that he was dead, and witnesses surfaced with bewildering rumors about his whereabouts. One man claimed Percy had gone native and was living in the jungle. Another, that he was being held prisoner by Indians. Still, another maintained that he had become chief of a tribe of cannibals along the Xingu River. The Royal Geographical Society declared the men as lost in January 1927, almost 2 years after the party's last correspondence. Soon after this declaration, a large number of volunteers offered to attempt to locate the lost explorers. In 1928, the Royal Geographical Society's George Miller Diet launched the first expedition to search for Fawcett and his party. He emerged from the jungle convinced that the expedition had perished, but he had no hard evidence and was unable to locate any bodies. There is consequently still no proof that the 3 explorers are dead, a defiant Nina Fawcett told reporters. She remained hopeful of her son and husband's return until her death. Over the years to come, tantalizing traces of his expedition turned up. A nameplate in 1927, a theodolite in 1933, and even his signet ring in 1979. During the ensuing decades, various groups mounted several rescue expeditions without success. They heard only various rumors that could not be verified. While a fictitious tale estimated that 100 would-be rescuers died on several expeditions attempting to discover Percy's fate, the actual toll was only 1, a sole man who ventured after him alone. As recently as 1996, a team of Fawcett hunters led by a wealthy businessman named James Lynch was captured by Amazonian Indians and held for ransom. They only escaped with their lives after giving up $30,000 worth of equipment. Many people assumed that local indigenous people killed Fawcett's party as several tribes were nearby at the time. The Kalapalos, the last tribe to have seen them, the Arumas, the Suya, and the Chavantes, whose territory they were entering. To add to this theory, the most prominent rumor surrounding Percy's disappearance is that he, his son, and his son's friend were consumed by cannibalistic tribes. According to explorer John Hemming, Fawcett's party of 3 was too few to survive in the jungle. 20 years later, a Kalapalo chief called Kamatsi told his people how unwelcome strangers were killed. It's reported that Kamatsi's predecessor, Izari, had said he killed Percy and his son Jack, seemingly by shooting them with arrows after Percy allegedly attacked him and other Indians when they refused to give him guides to take him to their Chavante enemies. Rimmel had already died of fever in a Kuruku camp. A somewhat different version came from Orlando Villas Boas, who reported that Izari had told him that he killed all 3 men with his club the morning after Jack had allegedly consorted with one of his wives, and Percy slapped him in the face after the chief refused his demand for guides to continue his journey. The Kalapalo have an oral story of the arrival of 3 explorers, which states that the 3 went east, and after 5 days, the tribe noticed that the group no longer made campfires. The Kalapalo say that a very violent tribe most likely killed them. However, both of the younger men were lame and ill when last seen, and there is no proof that they were murdered. It is plausible that they died of natural causes in the Brazilian jungle. Explorer Henry Costin, who accompanied Percy on 5 of his previous expeditions, expressed his doubt that Percy would have perished at the hands of native indigenous people, as he typically enjoyed good relations with them. He believed that Percy had succumbed to either a lack of food or exhaustion. Researchers have blamed Percy's disappearance on everything from malaria and parasitic infection to starvation, drowning, and jaguar attacks. Some have even argued that Percy, a longtime dabbler in mysticism, vanished on purpose and set up an occult commune in the jungle. Percy's fate may never be known, but in recent years, evidence has shown that his theory of a sophisticated jungle city was not a total fantasy. Many archaeologists now believe the Amazon was home to dozens of bustling settlements in the centuries before the arrival of Europeans. Excavations have revealed the ruins of garden cities with earthen defense walls, complex road networks, and enough space for thousands of inhabitants. Some of these sites are nestled deep in the modern-day state of Mato Grosso, the very region where Percy Fawcett hoped to find his mythical city of Zed. Thank you for listening to Without a Trace with your host, Jillian. I hope you enjoyed our deep dive into Percy's disappearance. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please subscribe and follow the podcast on social media. Join me next week as I dive into another case.